Hello, everyone. I'm Emily.
And I'm Hannah.
And we are the hosts of the I Don't Think So podcast, where we decide if we think a conspiracy theory is believable or if we really don't think so.
Right, so every Wednesday we'll come on and share a conspiracy theory that we've prepared. And we are also affiliated with the Flurry Sports podcast. So you might have been turned over here from our brothers, Zach and Jake, after they just flourished us with compliments. One thing I do love is a good compliment, and they were just saying how good we were doing. So if you have high hopes, we hope that we fill those for you and that you can appreciate whatever we decide to bring each week.
Yeah. If you like this podcast, give us a like and a share. And you can also follow us on Twitter at IDon'tThinkSo_EH. And I believe I've linked our email there. So go ahead and email us if you feel like it.
Yeah, if you have any podcast or conspiracy theory suggestions that you want us to try to research, just let us know and we'll do our best.
So last week, if you tuned in, Hannah was actually the one who brought the conspiracy theory regarding Jack from the Titanic being a time traveler, and we both were pretty sure that he in fact was a time traveler. We did put a Twitter poll out there, and I'm almost certain that he's not a time traveler, but
I didn't even look at that. That's so sad.
That's fine. We disagree with you, but that's okay.
It's okay to be wrong sometimes, meaning you.
It's all right. I'm not talking about Hannah or I. I'm talking about you, but that's okay. So this week, I've actually prepared the conspiracy theory. And one thing you need to know about Hannah and I is that we absolutely adore true crime.
Yes.
Yeah, so we watch all the Netflix documentaries. Gotta love it. Big true crime buffs. So Hannah, have you ever heard of John Dillinger?
That name doesn't pop in my brain right away, but I'm sure if you explain stuff, maybe I've heard of him, because I feel like I've watched a lot of things, but then the names always get floundered in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So
I didn't know who he was when I started looking up conspiracy theories for this week, but when I asked my parents about, did you ever hear of him? Because I thought for sure they were going to say no. They're like, of course. So
did it happen a long time ago?
Yes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on who John was and some of his crimes. And then at the very end, I'll kind of get to our conspiracy theory.
Perfect.
All right. So John, born in 1903, he was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, to a middle-class family. Super strict father and a stepmother who he absolutely hated. So recipe for disaster. His mom passed away when he was only 3. So his stepmother was in his life very, very early on. So pretty early in John's adolescence, he had a very odd personality. And it became apparent to those he was around, and he was almost always in trouble. He quit school. Great stuff. Good start. And he began working in a machine shop where he actually was described as very smart and being a very hard worker.
Interesting. Okay.
However, John found the work to be absolutely boring because he was just so intelligent. He often stayed out all night partying and getting into trouble with the law. So, his dad then moved them out of the city to a rural farming community where, shockingly, John was still in trouble. I know. Shocking that moving him out of the city didn't change anything. So, on one occasion, he was in trouble for auto theft. He decided his best option was to then enlist in the Navy.
Okay.
He was on the outs with his dad. He didn't want to go home. Didn't want to go to jail. So he's like, I'll just join the Navy. Why not? That actually was very short-lived as he, again, got into trouble on the ship. And then he deserted ship in Boston. So he's in Boston. He's like, great, What do I do? So he moves back home and marries a 16-year-old girl.
Ooh.
Starting good, John. Starting good. So he marries her. The couple then moves back to Indianapolis. John had absolutely no work, or no luck finding work in the city. And he ended up joining the town pool shark, Ed Singleton, because he was like, I need to make some easy money. So in their first kind of crime attempt, they attempted to rob a grocer in Mooresville.
Okay.
One thing you're going to know about John, he gets caught a lot.
So he's like not a good criminal. Like he
Caught a lot.
will get in trouble a lot. So it sounds like growing up he was like kind of naughty and they were trying to fix it but didn't really do anything about it.
Yes.
And it was just kind of getting brushed under the rug. And there was no clear like stop to his patterns.
No.
But then also
Absolutely.
wasn't like that great at it either.
He was like, he actually is a very famous gangster. However, it appears in my research that he get caught literally all the time. So they were caught trying to rob this grocer. So Singleton, Ed, he pleaded not guilty and then stood trial and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. John was freaking out, so he called his dad, and his dad's like, you just need to confess because they'll be super lenient on you, no big deal. So he confesses, was then convicted of assault and battery with intent to rob and conspiracy to commit a felony, and then received a joint sentence for those two crimes of 2 to 14 years for one of the crimes. And the other crime was a 10 to 20 year sentence in the Indiana State Prison.
Wow.
So bad advice from dad.
Yeah.
So he was super shocked. He ended up going to prison. And he was often told that he was a very like tortured and bitter man in prison, which I think I would be too if I was thinking I was going to get 2 years and got 35.
For sure. Yeah. I wonder if he must have like admitted to more crimes than what they originally had charged him for or something.
I almost wonder with his criminal background, they were like,
we're going to try to stop you.
Really wasn't a slap on the wrist at this point. So don't you worry. So after a little over 8 years, he was paroled. And believe it or not, 8 years didn't correct him. So he almost immediately robbed a bank in Ohio, where again, he was caught basically right away. So when he was being frisked by the jail, the guards there found a piece of paper that outlined an escape plan from the prison he was originally at, the Indiana State Prison. And John, of course, was like, I have no idea what those are or how they got there. I'm just as confused as you are. And they were like, oh, I believe you. So 4 days later, a few of John's friends who were still in the Indiana State Prison used those exact same plans to then bust out of prison, where they shot 2 guards. And then they're like, oh, thank God for John. So they go to the jail that John is currently incarcerated at. And they're like, oh, we work for the prison. And we're here to escort him to the Indiana State Prison because he had a parole violation.
Okay.
And so the sheriff there was like, I don't think so. Like this show. And he asked him for like his friends for his ID. And so then one of John's friends shot him and beat him unconscious. They then released John and locked up the sheriff's wife and his deputy. Just to make sure no one followed them. The sheriff, ended up dying from his wounds. So while out on the run, John and his little gang robbed multiple banks and actually raided a bunch of police arsenals, where they stole like machine guns, various weapons, bulletproof vests, up to the 9s. Good times.
So they're getting away with more and more.
Yes.
As a team.
They work better as a unit.
Yeah.
So we're going to fast forward then to 1934. So the 4 men are in a hotel in Tucson, Arizona, when the hotel catches fire. So they run out, and the firefighter's like, I recognize you. So they're immediately arrested. So while in prison, John whittles himself a little fake gun out of some wood he found and uses the weapon to fool 2 guards standing outside his cell into opening his cell, where he then beats them and takes their weapons, and he again escapes from prison.
Wow.
Which, when I was told that, I was like, who? Maybe I just don't understand the layout of this prison. But if he's behind a cell, can't you just, like, move to the side to not
That's
get
what I was
shot?
thinking. Well, and where are they thinking he got it?
Don't know. They didn't say. I know. So, escapes for a second time. At this point, he runs out and he steals a sheriff's car and drives out of state, which makes it an FBI case for the first time.
Okay.
So John ends up driving around. He ends up in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he teamed up with Babyface Nelson, who you've probably heard of as a huge gangster. And they continue to rob banks in the area. So then, fast forwarding again. Well, not really fast forwarding. But on March 30th in 1934, an agent goes up to the manager of the Lincoln Court Apartments, which is an apartment complex in St. Paul. And the guy's like, I have a couple kind of suspicious tenants. And their names are Mr. and Mrs. Hellman. And they've just been really weird. They're super nervous. They, like, didn't really want to talk to the apartment caretaker. They were just weird. So the FBI is like, I'll just go take a peek. And he knocks on the door. And Evelyn Frichette, gonna mess up that name, Evelyn, who is John's girlfriend at the time, opens the door and then just slams it shut. And I'm like,
That's not suspicious at all.
Oopsies, not supposed to. So the agent's like, got him, know who it is. So he calls for reinforcements to surround the building. So as he's calling, the door busts open to their apartment, and the muzzle of a machine gun starts completely spraying the hallway with bullets.
Wow.
So under the cover of the machine gun fire, John and Evelyn flee through the back door. They end up going to Babyface Nelson's accomplice, whose last name is Green, where John ended up, he got a bullet, he got shot on the way out, and he received care. So from there, John and Evelyn were like, I don't really know what to do. So they end up going back to John's dad's place. And he's like, I just need to rest, heal up from my wounds. Evelyn gets bored. She's like, I don't really want to be in this rural town. So she ends up going to visit friends up in Chicago, where she gets arrested. Shocker. And is convicted of conspiracy to harbor a fugitive, which happened a lot for the girlfriends of mobsters. It is what it is, you know? So the FBI receive a tip then. Now, there's been this weird influx of some suspicious guests at the summer resort of Little Bohemia Lodge, which is actually about 50 miles north of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Back to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So, and one of them sounded like it was John, and the other sounded a lot like it was Babyface Nelson. So they're like, oh, okay. So from Rhinelander, an FBI task force set out by car to go to Little Bohemia. Crazily enough, on the way there, 2 of the rented cars break down. And it was April when this happened, and it was so cold out, like uncommonly cold, even for Wisconsin. So some of the agents had to make the trip then by standing on the running boards of the other rented cars that hadn't broken down.
Oh my gosh.
I can only imagine.
Like, going that fast if it was that cold.
I'd be like, can you just scoot over? Like,
I'll lay on you, thanks.
I'll sit in the trunk. I don't mind.
Yeah.
No. So they end up going on the running boards. So they get there. The agents spread out, surround the lodge. And as they approach, they think they've been so sneaky. They shut off all their lights. No. Machine gun fire starts rattling down on them from the roof of the Little Bohemia Lodge.
Hotel. Okay. That's a hotel?
It's like a hotel.
Okay.
Like a motel. Hotel, motel. Holiday Inn.
Holiday Inn.
Good song. So, the
Love
agents
Diplo.
run.
Okay, sorry, continue.
He was great. He was at the Minnesota State Fair. I heard great things.
I saw a video of someone like, oh, you brought your grandma, ha ha ha. She's like dancing, and they're like, no, the grandma brought us. And I was like, queen.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
So they're getting shot at. So they're running, ducking, hiding. One of them runs over to a telephone because 1930s, didn't have a cell phone. So they run over to a telephone booth and they call additional agents who are back in Rhinelander, and they're like, you gotta come and back up this operation. So they come, and the firing had all like kind of subsided, and they go and they look, and John was completely gone. So John and 5 others had actually fled through a back window before the agents even surrounded the house. So they saw them coming.
They're coming, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Way to go, everybody.
There was the people on the running boards.
You blew it. You got come on. They're like, John looked out the window and he's like, there's no way anybody in their right mind
is
driving on a running board
in Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
So late in the afternoon of Saturday, July 21st, 1934, the madam of a brothel in Gary, Indiana, actually contacted one of the police officers with some information. The woman called herself Anna Sage. However, her real name was Anna Kupinianas, and she had entered the U.S. from Romania.
Okay.
So at the time, she was not, quote-unquote, a legal citizen, and she actually was considered, quote, an undesirable alien by the Immigration and Naturalization Service just due to her profession.
Sure.
She's doing a service. Leave her alone.
Mm-hmm. She was working at the grocery store. You'd be fine with her, but I guess not.
Mm-mm. So, deportation proceedings had already kind of started for her. So Anna was willing to sell the FBI some information about John for a cash reward, as well as the FBI's help in preventing her being deported.
Okay.
Get it, Anna? So in the meeting with Anna, some of the FBI agents were really cautious about what they promised her. So they said that if her information led to John's capture, they would give her money. But they said all they could do was call like her cooperation to the attention of the Department of Labor, which at the time was the people who deported individuals. Okay. So Anna's like, well, I guess that's all I'm going to get. So she told the agents that a friend of hers named Polly had visited Anna's establishment with John, and Anna was like, oh, I know who he is from all the newspaper photographs. So Anna told agents that she, Polly, and John were probably going to the movies the following evening at either the Biograph or the Marlboro Theater. She said that she would notify them when the theater was chosen. She also said that she would wear an orange dress so they would know who she was. Queen.
Love it.
So next day rolls around, and Anna called saying that they're going to a movie, but she didn't know which theater they were actually going to go to. So agents were like, you gotta be shitting me. So they split up.
Split up, yeah. Ooh, okay.
Some went to one theater, some went to the other. So at 8:30, Anna, John, and Polly actually stroll on in to the Biograph Theater to see Clark Gable in the Manhattan melodrama. I know. So the agents call and they're like, come to this theater. So they all go to the Biograph Theater. They let them see the play.
That's nice of them.
Which I always thought was...
Interrupt.
Don't interrupt. Oddly enough, they're like, go to the play. You have a great time.
The 1930s. They're probably like, didn't have a lot of money, so enjoy your entertainment while you can.
Yeah. Go have a great time. So they're like, you go. So at 10:30, John, with his 2 ladies on either side, you know, Polly on one, Anna on the other, walk out of the theater, and he immediately like turned off to his left. And agents immediately start swarming him. So John quickly realized what was happening and he acted by instinct. He grabbed a pistol from his right trouser pocket and he ran towards an alley. 5 shots were reportedly fired by 3 FBI agents. 3 of the shots hit John and he fell face down on the pavement. So then at 10:50 p.m., same day, July 22nd, John was pronounced dead in a little room in the Alexian Brothers Hospital where they took him.
Okay.
Agents who fired the shots were named Charles Winstead, Clarence Hurt, and Herman Hollis. Each man was praised by J. Edgar Hoover, the president, for their fearlessness and courageous actions. However, none of them actually said who was the person who shot and killed John Dillinger. So this event in July in Chicago actually marked the beginning of the end of that kind of gangster era. And then John was actually buried in Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that's my little history lesson for you on who John Dillinger was. So now let's really move into the meat and potatoes of it all. Conspiracy time. Okay. So a little bit more about John. He was actually considered by a folk hero of the era due to the fact that many of his crimes included bank robbings, which at the time of the Great Depression, many banks were failing, leading to not allowing people to withdraw their money, a lot of homes and farms foreclosing. So people were kind of viewed him as a sort of Robin Hood type hero, hurting the people who hurt them. So he was actually kind of beloved in his era. The largest conspiracy that I'm going to bring up to you, that we are going to discuss, legs or no legs, is that John Dillinger is actually not still alive, but that the FBI shot the wrong person and are covering it up. Shocking. I know.
The FBI would never do anything to ever cover up anything ever. Just kidding. Okay, keep going.
So, a lot of confusion happens regarding some sites, like the FBI site that I got a lot of this information off of, said that only 5 rounds were shot, whereas a lot of other sites state that there was a heavy gunfire that ensued.
Okay.
So shooting was inconsistent. And on this famous shooting day, after they rolled John over because he fell face down, some immediately said that it was not John, while others were like, yeah, it's absolutely him. You don't know what you're talking about. So they take John's body to the morgue, where his family has to be brought in to identify the body. And immediately they're like, something's not quite right about the body in front of them. So they state that the person's facial structure wasn't quite right, and it didn't look how they remembered John looking, which he's dead, so maybe they're not used to seeing him dead. However, John was very well known for having these very bright blue eyes, and the body on the table had brown eyes. So besides the eyes, they said that John's head shape, teeth, ears, and his fingerprints weren't actually the same as the corpse's.
So it wasn't him.
Allegedly. So, after the shooting...
Did you say his family ID'd him?
His family was the one that was like, he had blue eyes.
But
anyways,
then
they ID'd him as John.
Him, though? Okay.
Yes. Even though they were like, there's all these inconsistencies with the body, they're like, that's John. So, almost immediately after the shooting, a ton of papers were actually printed, and all the stories regarded to how John Dillinger actually escaped, and the FBI was covering up the fact that they shot the wrong person. So, furthering this conspiracy theory, in 2019, John's niece and nephew filed to have the body of John exhumed and DNA tested because they so strongly believe that the person who's buried isn't actually John.
Okay.
However, this task is a little more difficult than usual because John's dad was the one who paid for him to be buried. And he was very worried that people were going to come and like deface his body, grave rob, things like that. So to avoid that, he had the casket encased in cement.
Wow.
Do what you gotta do, you know? So then the petition was actually approved for them to, they're like, you go ahead, you dig up that body. Mm-hmm. However, days before it was set to occur, it was halted due to a lawsuit filed by a man named Mike Thompson, claiming that it was a completely wrong petition and that John had actually been identified by 3 matching fingerprints. And Mike posted this all out there about, see these pictures, they match. So in 2022, they still haven't exhumed the body and checked. It also should be noted that there's some speculation about how when John was out on the run, he tried to burn off his own fingerprints in acid.
That could be wrong.
Yes. So it kind of is up for deliberation on how good his fingerprints still were. But yeah. So like I said, the body still hasn't been exhumed, leading to the continuation of the conspiracy theory regarding John's death or escape.
Do we know who this Mark Thompson person is?
Mike Thompson, no.
Oh, he just decided to sue him and be like,
he just said, no, you're wrong. Absolutely not. I did some Googling, and really there's nothing. There's a lot of cross information. Some people say he works for the FBI. Some people said he works for the cemetery. Other people say he's just a good citizen. So there's a lot of conflicting information about who Mike Thompson really is and what he has to do with the case.
Okay.
So Hannah, I turn it back on you. With all the information you have, tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I just kind of think about some of the other things I've heard with other like mob affiliations and things like that. A lot of times people would have kind of lookalikes or stand-ins if they knew that something were to happen, to kind of be the public face for them if they're going out to do something, or kind of like distract while they were getting in or out of something. So I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibilities that he could have walked into this movie theater and then had someone come in as like a stand-in to walk out so he could sneak out or something.
One thing I kept thinking about was he's had so many escapes, right? And they all seem to be like he knew people were there before they wanted him to. So I don't believe it's out of the realm of possibility that 1930s police officers weren't the most secretive.
Subtle. Yeah. Well, and I think about, too, like, if you're going to the movies, like, how many people were driving there? Like, the FBI probably drove there, so if you see a bunch of marked FBI or, like, fancy police cars outside, or even if he didn't know it was the FBI, but he saw, like, police presence there, right, and he's on the run, he's not going to walk out with these girls. He's going to have someone walk out for him. The only thing is, like, how would he know to bring somebody there to walk out for him unless it was, like, planned ahead of time that he wasn't going to do that? I also do think it's interesting that this woman who was, like, kind of selling him out, like, I wonder if she had warned him too, like, hey, I'm giving this information to try to be able to stay, but we'll actually plan that it's somebody else so that they think that they've killed you. You are now, like, not being looked for. You can kind of have a little bit more of a relaxed
fresh start.
life. Right. And then say he moved away, like moved to the West Coast or even somewhere else, like there's a good chance that people aren't going to recognize him. And then he can kind of have a fresh start with them not really hunting for him. So I think with all of the bits like that, I do think that it's a pretty good chance that it wasn't his body, especially because I think it's interesting that the family would say all these things like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but if they were kind of in on it
Mm-hmm.
and saying like, oh, they're going to say this, maybe they left and came back to ID it and they're like, oh, yep, that's him. They're so okay with IDing this person that doesn't like has all these things that are different. But if they knew he was alive and decided to ID this body as him, then they would be able to help him escape again.
For sure.
Especially because like his family had helped him previously. Like he's escaping. His dad kind of helped him out. His dad tried to help him out in the beginning with telling him to like admit to all these things, even though he got put away. Like it seemed that even though he was having all these issues, he still had his family's support.
Mm-hmm. When I looked this one up, I was like, I don't know, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for FBI to be like, oopsies. Really
Oh,
sorry about that. My bad. However, it does seem like there's a lot of people for it and a lot of people against it. I find it very interesting that like his dad was like so for sure that people were going to come look at this man's body that they were like, I'm covering him in cement.
Mm-hmm. Like we do not want you to look at him again so that you for sure like don't realize that it's not him.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the weird things though about like the 1930s is death was a little bit more publicized in the newspaper, so they actually had like pictures of John's body after he had passed away in the newspaper. Or quote unquote John's body. The body they put in.
And at that point, people were saying like they thought it was fake. Like they didn't think it was him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, newspapers right away were like, that's not John. However, you do have to know that like this man was like a folk hero for a lot of people. So
sure.
It wouldn't be shocking for people to be in a kind of a state of denial of the man who couldn't be killed, couldn't be kept in prison.
Fighting against the man,
mm-hmm.
kind of.
Fighting against banks, fighting against the people who've done me wrong. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that newspapers were also posting like, don't lose faith, it's okay. But yeah.
Did we hear of any other like crimes that continued similarly after?
Not that I researched. However, all the research I did find was that like the gangster era really it didn't last long after John was murdered. So Babyface Nelson was caught soon after and I think was killed for his crimes. Not killed for his crimes. Well, killed for his crimes. Whatever you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Put to death for his crimes.
Right. Well, and I think all of that was kind of following different points in history too with the Great Depression and different things, the Prohibition. Mm-hmm. And so I think people had other opportunities following that period that he could have potentially gotten into working for something, starting his own business, being successful where he didn't have to rely on stealing things to support himself and do well for himself, especially if people aren't looking for him. Like he could hold down a job now versus when you've escaped prison, you can't really do that.
What do you mean?
But yeah, I believe that. I think that this theory has legs. Like I could see it definitely happening that he didn't actually get killed and some other person was in his spot and that the FBI is kind of just like, that one's done. We don't need to worry about him anymore.
We're not going to look for him because that admits fault. You know? Because you're not going to be like, oh, he's absolutely dead. And then you're spending all this money looking for somebody who's dead. So the original conspiracy that I found was that he's still alive, which would make him 119.
Yeah, no. That
so
I don't believe.
I don't believe he's still alive. If you want to go for it, you go for it. But the man, from what it seems, lived a very hard life. that doesn't typically do well for longevity.
No, I'm sure at some point he passed away. I just do agree that I think that he wasn't necessarily killed by the FBI on that night leaving the movie theater.
Look at us. 2 down, 2 with legs.
3 down.
3 down. 4. We have 4 conspiracies.
4 conspiracies, 3 episodes. That's crazy. Well, I hope everyone's enjoying it. Let us know if you think that you agree that either he survived the shooting or if you disagree and you think that actually he was killed that night by the FBI. We'd love to get any sort of suggestions of conspiracies that you'd like us to look into. And maybe we'll be having some different exciting guests again in the near future.
Thanks for listening, guys. We look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday. And again, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at @IDon'tThinkSo_EH and checking out Flurry Sports' other podcasts, which include the Flurry Sports podcast, shocker of a name, I know, as well as the Playing Catch Up podcast.
Great. We'll see you next week.